This program is intended for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised.
Let's go. 1700s. About 300 plus years into the past, it's a dreadful time to be alive. African men, women, and children were forcibly captured, tortured, sold, and shipped into a world of mistreatment, captivity, oppression, and dehumanization. Thrusted into a world in which by the time the soles of their feet touched the soil of the newly European seized land, they were to be valued not only by the world, but even by themselves to be as worthless as the ground in which both the European and African walked on. Priceless as the mind, heart, body, and soul of an African has the unspeakable ability to bring about floods of abundance and prosperity. Powerful as the hands and feet of an African have the strength to build a nation. Yet, worthless in terms of equal human value. Their contributions to the creation and birthing of a seemingly united nation were left out of history. However, it would not be very fair of me to only condemn the Europeans, as it is well known that it takes two to tango. Here, we have an African Nigerian by the name Siriki Williams Abaz. He was born in a southwestern Nigerian town in Ilero Ogun State. He was captured as a slave by a Dahomian slave merchant named Abaz. Abaz, being a slave merchant, worked as a loyal servant to the Dahomey Kingdom, a royal West African kingdom ruled by several West African men, emerging as one of the most significant key players in the trafficking of West Africans during the Atlantic slave trade, selling and trading their people to Europeans in exchange for European goods such as rifles, gunpowder, fabrics, cowrie shells, tobacco, pipes, and unsurprisingly, alcohol. Abaz, now being a slave of the West African Dahomey Kingdom, is later sold to a Caucasian Brazilian slave dealer named Williams, who then takes Abaz to Brazil as a domestic servant, eventually teaching him how to read and write in various languages. Abaz returned to Nigeria in the 1830s, marked with the middle name and last name of his previous slave owners, and becomes a slave trade business partner with his last owner, Williams. Now, with the help of his European partners and patrons, he built and maintained a 40-room barracoon, which were disgusting small rooms equivalent to prison cells that were used to house captured slaves that would later be sold to European slave merchants and shipped away across the Atlantic. To make things, even more interesting, there were European explorers, Richard Lander being one of them, that would write books, illustrated pieces of literature, and other exploratory accounts describing the disgusting and horrifically barbaric operations of these horrible slave factories. He would become very wealthy and successful, gaining loads of respect and eventually holding various top political and organizational positions. Have a listen.
This man, William Serkia Bass, who was a former slave, became a slave merchant and allowed his people to be sold for umbrellas, gin, mirrors, ceramic bowls, and the dumbest things. These barricades were in his estate. Man, was I upset. And I wasn't the only one because his family put up a statement apologizing for his involvement. Okay, let me put this into perspective. A bottle of gin was 10 slaves, an umbrella was 40 slaves, a mirror was 5 slaves.
Interesting. Before these unfortunate souls would be inhumanely packed onto filthy, cursed, Caucasian European colonizing ships, they were forced to go through a series of spiritual rituals that would take place within these slave ports that they held these slaves in. These spiritual rituals would include walking around a cursed tree known as the Tree of No Return, drinking poison water from a cursed well known as the Attenuation Well, have a listen to this.
The Attenuation Well is an ancient water well that's located on the slave route that led to the point of no return, or some people call it the gate of no return. At one point in history, the local rulers would take captives and then they would give them to the Europeans to go through this whole process. So at the point of no return, or the gate of no return, that was the last time the captives' feet would touch African soil. So what was said was that the local doctors and the local practitioners got with the Europeans in order to add certain herbs into that well where the captives would actually drink before they go on this, I guess you say, route. But the Europeans made the captives drink from this well so that they could forget, so that they cannot be as rebellious. But it was the beginning of a process.
Now this is where it gets freaky. This is the Attenuation Well. Apparently my ancestors were so aggressive and would rather die than get on that ship. I mean, yeah, me too. And so they were forced to drink out of this well, which was a concussion, jazz, and they would lose their memories and get less aggressive. This was the script they were forced to recite before getting on the ship.
My ancestors left this land, but their spirits will return. They shall come back now. Their shackles have broken. Their shackles are not tied down to that ship. As a descendant, I bear witness, they shall return. Our land shall not depart. Their souls will fight. Their spirits will come back. They departed to the land unknown, but they shall return.
And you can actually say it was a ritual. After they drank from this well, they had to say this incantation. This incantation, I really truly believe they made the captives say it because they knew that the captives were very connected to their culture, very connected to the land. They were the land and had a very rich history and a very old bloodline, a bloodline that was strong, a bloodline that was hard to break. And they honestly, I think they felt that if they took the captives off the island without going through this process, that as soon as their bodies left Mother Africa, Mother Alkebulan, that their souls would be detached and they wouldn't survive the trip. So I believe because they said this incantation, their bodies and spirits were able to leave the motherland together. Also because they drink from the Attenuation Well, as they said that incantation, their body and spirit is bounded together. So when they leave Mother Alkebulan, both believe at the same time.
Now, a lot of Black people are starting to get very spiritual. We're starting to get very back home to our land. You hear me? But my thing is this. This don't catch y'all eye. We had to say this after we drunk a potion.
So to kind of give you a visual, the captives drink from the Attenuation Well to make them disoriented. They say the incantation so that their body and spirit would be bound together. On that slave route, they had to go to the point of no return, the gate of no return, which is like 2 pillars. It looks like this right here, and it's 2 pillars coming together. And what really caught my eye about this is that it looks like a portal. It looks very much like a portal. Did y'all catch that, or am I just tripping? So the people that's slow to catch on are some people that can't believe what I just said. Let's repeat it again. You drink from the well, a potion per se. You say an incantation, and you walk through a portal.
Is this the curse?
I think it's the very beginning of a very unfortunate thing that happened to our people.
So, African doctors and leaders, spiritual leaders, were purposefully cursing their own people using black magic rituals by request from these Caucasian European colonizers, magically cutting the God-given umbilical cords that spiritually tied our distant African ancestors to the motherly land of Africa, spiritually deleting their identities to soon be given new ones by their Caucasian European colonizing slave owners in other foreign lands, among them being the newly seized and colonized land of North America, a place that has for many years been taught to millions of young and impressionable American students to have been discovered by a Caucasian European colonizing fraud by the name Christopher Columbus.
Columbus didn't discover America. You can't discover a place where people are already living, but we celebrate that every October. It's a lie.
But wait, there's more.
Christopher Columbus, one of my favorite anti-heroes of history, one of the great fakes of all times. You know, a man an utter fraud who discovered absolutely nothing. But Christopher Columbus said, as man and boy, I sailed up and down the Guinea coast for 23 years. Now, mingling with African sailors, he learned that there was a world out there, and he learned how, from African sailors, how to come to the so-called New World. When he arrived in the New World, he found Africans doing business with the Indians and minted corn. Christopher Columbus knew he discovered absolutely nothing.
As much as we here on LTL would love to further discuss the likely false teachings of American discoveries, we unfortunately do not have time for that. However, we do invite you to likely discover the truth on those topics on other programs. Thank you. Millions of our African descended ancestors that were sadly fortunate enough to survive the horrendous trips were now North American slaves, legally seized and bought property of Caucasian European colonizers. Millions of them, with their spiritual ties to Africa cut, still had their natural, God-given instincts of survival within them, which is what allowed them to band together and fight back against some of the Caucasian European colonizers that had captured and enslaved them, many of which were overtaken and killed at sea. Have a listen to this.
If you watch films about slavery in popular culture, you might get the impression that slavery was pretty straightforward, and slaveholders were in total comfort as their enslaved Africans worked the fields. However, the historical record proves otherwise. Letters and diaries from the American South in the 1800s indicate that slaveholders lived in constant fear of rebellion, and the Haitian Revolution pretty much gave them a heart attack. To repress and control slave rebellion, especially in those places such as South Carolina and the Caribbean islands, where persons in slavery outnumbered the free sometimes 10-1, Africans were forbidden to meet in groups or to learn to read, and they lived under the constant scrutiny of their overseers. Families were often separated, further increasing their isolation from one another and from white society.
So, with so many African black slaves fighting back against their inhumane treatment and enslavement, Caucasian European colonizers were finding it increasingly costly and difficult to maintain behavioral control over their slaves, leading to North American Caucasian European slave owners calling in help from a man by the name of Willie Lynch. He was invited to Virginia, traveling from his own plantation in the West Indies, to give an informative, I guess you would call it informative speech on his methods of controlling and maintaining slaves. Have a listen.
This speech was delivered by Willie Lynch on the bank of the James River in the colony of Virginia in 1712. Lynch was a British slave owner in the West Indies. He was invited to the colony of Virginia in 1712 to teach his methods to slave owners there. The term lynching is derived from his name. Greetings. Gentlemen, I greet you here on the bank of the James River in the year of our Lord 1712. First, I should thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I am here to help you solve some of your problems with slaves. Your invitation reached me on my modest plantation in the West Indies, where I have experimented with some of the newest and still have the oldest methods for control of slaves. Ancient Rome would envy us if my program is implemented. As our boat sailed south on the James River, named for our illustrious king, whose version of the Bible we cherish.
See, all of you Africans over there on the continent, over in England, who went there voluntarily because they colonized your country, so that made you automatically an English person. And you gave up your Africanism. Don't sit over there acting like you're in a better position because you voluntarily went to a place to colonize the place that you were from. Okay? I think you're getting a little disrespectful. So let me just let you know, they are Anglos, meaning the only way that you can be of the monarch, you have to be an Anglo-Saxon white. Now, we know somewhere down in the line, they've been mixing just like they mix over here and let it pass. You can't even be a Catholic and be a part of the monarch. Do you understand that? King James VI, who wrote the Bible that you guys, he was banned from England. Okay? That's why the Quakers and the Mormons the Quakers and the Amish wasn't feeling him. They took a book that was banned in England, brought it over here to the United States, said give it to them Africans. That way we can rule. Celestine did the same thing. Him and King James made up this whole big bullcrap that we are all, mourning what? That's just like mourning the starter of apartheid. That's like mourning Thomas Jefferson, who committed pedophilia and gave out babies to an African girl who took care of him for the rest of her life. But y'all want to say Michelle Obama was the first, first lady. No. Sally Hemings was the first lady. She was there 9 years before, after Martha died, when he first took office and took care of that fool till he died.
Not unique. While Rome used cords of wood as crosses for standing human beings along its highways in great numbers, you are here using the tree and the rope on occasions. I caught the whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple of miles back. You are not only losing valuable stock by hangings, you are having uprisings. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the fields too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasional fires. Your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what your problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I am not here to enumerate your problem. I am here to introduce you to a method of solving them. In my bag here, I have a foolproof method for controlling your black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that if you installed it correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. My method is simple. Any member of your family or your overseer can use it. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take them differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take this simple little list of differences and think about it. On top of my list is age, but it's there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. There is intelligence, size, sex, sizes of plantations, status on plantations, attitude of owners, whether the slaves live in the valley, on a hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall give you an outline of action. But before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. The black slaves, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black male, and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves, and the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. You must use the female versus the male, and the male versus the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks. But it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. Gentlemen, these kits are your keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensely for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. Thank you, gentlemen.
The contents of this deplorable letter are highly graphic in nature, as it specifically describes the scientific psychological process that Caucasian European descended slave owners implemented on the early African black generations. I, here on LTL, will undoubtedly not be shedding a penny of light on the disgustingly gruesome and unholy details of this sickeningly twisted letter. However, it is highly recommended that you go to the description and continue to listen to the full length of this letter in its entirety. For doing so will likely begin the psychological reversal of a 410-year-old mental trap that has undoubtedly enslaved the minds of countless African American generations, and without a doubt, divided the African descended black community to the current date. Again, I will not be unveiling the specific details of this deplorable letter, but I would like to draw you all's attention to a particular portion of this letter that I believe holds the key to likely breaking this nearly 400-year-old generational mental curse. Have a bit of a listen to this.
Controlled language. Crossbreeding completed for further severance from their original beginning.
According to history, people of color was enslaved by weak, bigot white folk. I categorize it like that because all white brothers are not racist. Only them that are bigots endorse slavery. So when our ancestors was captured, arrested for being black, whatever name they originally had, they were stripped of their name, stripped of their culture, and stripped of their language. So if your name was from some African origin, Mabunda, and yet your slave master last name was Brown, you took on the name of your slave master. And then the slave master took your wife, took your mother, took your aunt, took your daughters, took your grandmother, and discharged his seed into the brown body.
Crossbreeding niggers means taking so many drops of good white blood and putting them into as many nigger women as possible, varying the drops by the various tones that you want, and then letting them breed with each other until another circle of color appears as you desire.
And Mapunda lost his name. All the blacks took on the name Brown and was the property of Brown. So now each child that would come from the women was mixed with seed from a white man. And this has been spreaded for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years until it's hard to find a full-blooded black man in America.
We must completely annihilate the mother tongue of both the new nigger and the new mule.
They were stripped of their name, stripped of their culture, and stripped of their language.
And institute a new language that involves the new life's work of both. You know, language is a peculiar institution. It leads to the heart of a people. The more a foreigner knows about the language of another country, the more he is able to move through all levels of that society. Therefore, if the foreigner is an enemy of the country, to the extent that he knows the body of the language, to that extent is the country vulnerable to attack or invasion of a foreign culture. For example, if you take a slave, if you teach him all about your language, he will know all your secrets, and he is then no more a slave, for you can't fool him any longer. And being a fool is one of the basic ingredients of an incident to the maintenance of the slavery system.
Africans were forbidden to meet in groups or to learn to read, and they lived under the constant scrutiny of their overseers.
For example, if you told a slave that he must perform in getting out our crops, and he knows the language well, he would know that our crops didn't mean our crops, and the slavery system would break down, for he would relate on the basis of what our crops really meant. So you have to be careful in setting up the new language, for the slaves would soon be in your house, talking to you man to man, and that is death to our economic system. In addition, the definitions of words or terms are only a minute part of the process. Values are created and transported by communication through the body of the language. A total society has many interconnected value systems. All the values in the society have bridges of language to connect them for orderly working in the society.
The following message includes language that is insultingly contemptuous and disdainful, as it mocks the brave and heroic contributions African-descended people made to the birthing of a seemingly united nation, while also mocking the continuous social, educational, environmental, economic, legal, and political injustice of the African American people, as it uses language that is both cunning and disgustingly sarcastic in nature.
Dear Black Americans, after all of these years and all we have been thought together, we think it's appropriate for us to show our gratitude for all you have done for us. We have chastised you, criticized you, punished you, and in some cases even apologized to you. But we have never formally nor publicly thanked you for your never-ending allegiance and support to our cause. This is our open letter of thanks. We will always be in your debt to you for your labor. You built this country and were responsible for the great wealth we still enjoy today. Upon your backs, laden with the stripes we sometimes had to apply for disciplinary reasons, you carried our nations. We thank you for your diligence and your tenacity. Even when we refused to allow you to even walk in our shadows, you followed close behind, believing that someday we would accept you and treat you like men and women. We publicly acknowledge Black people for raising our children, attending to our sick, preparing our meals while we were occupied with the trappings of the good life. Even during the time when we found pleasure in your women and enjoyment in seeing your men lynched, maimed, burned, some of you continued to watch over us and our belongings. We simply cannot thank you enough. Your bravery on the battlefield, despite being classified as 3/5 of a man, was and still is outstanding. We often watched in awe as you went about your prescribed chores and assignments, sometimes laboring in the hot sun for 12 hours, to assist in realizing our dreams of wealth and good fortune. Now that we control 90% of all the resources and wealth of this nation, we have Black people to thank the most. We can only think of the sacrifices you and your families made to make it all possible. You were there when it all began, and you are still with us today, protecting us from those Black people who have the temerity to speak out against our past transgressions. Thank you for continuing to bring 90% of what you earn to our businesses. Thanks for buying our Hilfigers, Karens, Nikes and all other brands you so adore. Your super rich athletes, entertainers, intellectuals, and business persons exchange most of their money for our car, jewelry, homes, and clothing. What a windfall they have provided for us. The less fortunate among you spend all they have at our neighborhood stores, enabling us to open even more stores. Sure, they complain about us, but never do anything to hurt us economically. Allow us to thank you for not bogging yourself down with the business of doing business with your own people. We can take care of that for you. You just keep doing business with us. It's safer that way. Besides, everything you need, we make anyway, even kente cloth. You just continue to dance, sing, and distrust and hate one another. Have yourself a good time, and this time we'll take care of you. It's the least we can do, considering all that you have done for us. Heck, you deserve it, Black people. For all your labor, which created our wealth, for your resisting the message of troublemaking Blacks like Washington, Delaney, Garvey, Bethune, Tubman, and Truth, for fighting and dying on our battlefields, we thank you. And we really thank you for not reading about the many Black warriors that participated in the development of our great country. We thank you for keeping it hidden from the younger generation. Thank you for not bringing such glorious deeds to our attention. For allowing us to move into your neighborhoods, we will forever be grateful to you. For your unceasing desire to be near us and for hardly ever following through on your threats due to lack of reciprocity and equity, we thank you so much. We also appreciate your acquiescence to our political agendas, for abdicating your own economic self-sufficiency, and for working so diligently for the economic well-being of our people. You are real troopers. And, even though the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were written for you and many of your relatives dies for the rights described therein, you did not resist when we changed those Black rights to civil rights and allowed virtually every other group to take advantage of them as well. Black people, you are something else. Your dependence upon us to do the right thing is beyond our imagination, irrespective of what we do to you and the many promises we have made and broken. But, this time we will make it right, we promise. Trust us. Tell you what. You don't need your own hotels. You can continue to stay in ours. You have no need for supermarkets when you can shop at ours 24 hours a day. Why should you even think about owning more banks? You have plenty now. And don't waste your energies trying to break into manufacturing. You work hard enough in our fields. Relax. Have a party. We'll sell everything you need. And when you die, we'll even bury you at a discount. How's that for gratitude? Finally, the best part. You went beyond the pale and turned over your children to us for their education. With what we taught them, it's likely they will continue in a mode similar to the one you have followed for the past 45 years. When Mr. Lynch walked on the banks of the James River in 1712 and said he would make us a slave for 300 years, little did he realize the truth in his prediction. Just 13 more years and his promise will come to fruition. But with 2 generations of your children having gone through our education system, we can look forward to at least another 50 years of prosperity. Things could not be better, it's all because of you. For all you have done, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts, Black Americans. You're the best friends and group of people could ever have.
This video is intended to illuminate the immoral and disgusting roots of the horrendous beginnings of our distant ancestors that were brought here to be nothing more than worthless slaves who work and support the dealings and affairs of the people enslaving them. This Lynch letter was an added layer of disrespect and inhumane treatment by humanity. This letter highlights the final attempt by the unscrupulous people of humanity to destroy the divine mind of our people, meticulously studying us, all with the purpose of designing a disgustingly unholy method to create division amongst our people. Purposefully, psychologically warping our minds to hate and distrust ourselves, self-sabotage ourselves, and divide ourselves while holding unconditional loyalty and trust in them. Devilishly abusing and mistreating our early generations to self-condition each other to be loyal, obedient servants and slaves. Designing the early stages of colorism and creating the methods that would generationally destroy the African American family unit. The love for one another was lost and destroyed. The natural ability to create community and unity within our neighborhoods and communities was destroyed. Our hearts were plagued by greed and disloyalty, self-sabotage and fear, doing whatever it takes to get ahead for our own self-interest. Our ancestors were traded and sold into the hands of devious European colonizers who would treat us no better than the people who looked just like us. They say blood is thicker than water. But in this instance, materialistic things and political power were way more valuable and way more attractive than the blood which African leaders shared with their own brothers and sisters, selfishly choosing meaningless materials and power over the lives of the divine people of its land. Now, I want to make it absolutely clear that this video is in fact not intended to provoke racial hatred. In fact, it should be understood that there was only one race, the human race. A woman by the name of Jane Elliot spoke on this very beautifully. I want you all to have a listen to what she says.
In the present. What we do in the present constructs the future. What we have done in the past, we can learn from that. And we'd better learn from that. Those who forget the mistakes of the past are doomed to repeat them. And when you read this book, you'll realize that that's exactly what we're doing. We're repeating the mistakes that we have made in the past because we aren't teaching about these mistakes in the present. We are not teaching history that is true. We aren't teaching social studies that is true. We aren't even teaching true geography, for God's sake. You want to talk about forgiveness? You want to talk about changing this thing? I cannot understand how Japanese people can stand the sight of any of us, and yet they do. I cannot understand why black people who have been subjected to the ugliness that they've been subjected to in this country can get up every morning and go to work among us and not be absolutely furious. And I don't understand why we allow white people to behave the way they do. We have got to stop tolerating the intolerable. If it's intolerable for my black cousins, and every black person on this earth is one of my cousins, if it's intolerable for them, it's intolerable for me. I will not tolerate it. I will not tolerate it. That is not that. I am required not to tolerate that kind of treatment for the people who are related to me. And that's every person on the face of the earth. If your ignorance is such that you'll mistreat somebody because of your ignorance about the color of their skin, don't do it around me. Number one, I've been threatened with death lots of times. Now I say, go for it, fool. My husband died 4 years ago. Being with him would not be a bad thing for me. Death is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Living a worthless, useless life is much worse than dying.
Now, with all of that being said, may you all be free from your racial stupidity and unchained by your mental captivity. And until next time, my name's Bobby from YouTube.com, and you're watching LTL.
Venison go with you, and with those that would make good of bad, and friends of foes.